Hey, welcome to a tutorial where I teach you how to be a better programmer. So somebody did ask me that how do I know all these things that I teach on my channel, and the short answer is experience, of course. But how exactly do you get that experience? This is what I'm here to discuss. So if you are new to the channel, please subscribe, or if you are already been here and you are not subscribed, please subscribe, because only 25% of you are subscribed. Thank you. All right, so let's forge ahead. So to start with, I've written a list of things just to remind me what we're going to discuss here. So first of all, obviously, the important thing to learn when you begin your training, this is focused on PHP, but you can apply these tips to any other programming language, of course. So the important thing is to begin with the syntax. So what does syntax mean? So the syntax is the language itself, how things are written in that programming language. So once you learn the syntax, then you know the basics. So how exactly do you get to the syntax? Well, Google is definitely your friend. So if I do happen to go to Google and type, for example, PHP tutorials, a good website is W3 Schools. So you can put that in your search if you want to, because these guys have tutorials for everything, for almost every language known. These guys have tutorials for all this. So for example, this PHP tutorial right here will show you all you need to learn about the syntax. All this up to object-oriented and then MySQL, XML, Ajax, examples, and some references here. So this is a very, very important resource for you to learn, because even if you already understand the syntax of the language, you are definitely going to learn something new while going through all this. Okay, so but the thing is, once you have the basics done, like for example, how to write variables, how to add values to those variables and so on, how to write loops, how to create arrays and so on, then you are practically good to go. So if you're at that level, then that is a very good start. If you're not, you can come to W3 Schools here and actually learn all this. Now, many young developers think what's important is to learn advanced things in the language, but that's actually not true. What's important is to learn the basics. So if you're very, very good with the basics, then there's nothing that will come in future that you're not going to be able to handle. So this is why it's very important to go to the documentation and learn all the basics, as much of the basics as you can. So stay on the basics for as long as possible. There's nothing to rush for, because where you're going ahead, you will need the concepts that you learned in the basics in order to continue. And so this is one resource, which is W3 Schools. But for PHP specifically, the best resource is php.net. So here you get to, this is where the documentation is when you come to the documentation of PHP. So anything you have a problem with, you just come here and put your search there and you have your answer on what that thing does. So for example, if there's a function you are looking at in a specific page and you don't know what that function does, just go open php.net and type your search here, and then it's going to explain what the thing is. Now, what's important here is to learn how to actually read the documentation, because you can have all this, but if this information looks foreign to you, then it becomes a bit of a problem. So if you notice, for example, here, I typed array in the search here, and then it brought me here. So it says, this is the description for array. So array is written like this. You write array, and then there's a bracket there, and then you put, and then you see here, it says mixed. So it's important for me, who is a a programmer who's been programming for a long time, once I look at this, I actually know and understand what an array is just by looking at this. This is okay, looking at this and actually reading a bit of the documentation, maybe up to here. This should be enough. So what this is telling me is that array is the keyword here, and then in here I have to put some values. Now these values are of type mixed. Now what mixed means is that it can be any of the values that are part of PHP. So it can be an array that I put in here, it will work. It can be a null, it can be a Boolean, any of those will work here. So if I just put the word array and put a bracket and put some content in here, then I have created an array. So the result is an array. So over here you see the result of this operation, which is an array. Okay. Now when we come to types here, there's a page right here where it says type. What is this? Type declarations here. So these are all the types that are there in PHP. So it's important to actually know these as well. So a Boolean, what is a Boolean? It's true or false. A float, which is a decimal point number. An integer, number without decimals. A string is just some characters. And an object. Or mixed, which means any of these above here. Okay, so this is important to learn as well. Okay, so let's take things a notch up. So once you are done learning the syntax, so we are here. So once you're done learning the syntax and you go through the documentation, actually before we wrap up with documentation, let's look at one more thing here to read. So let's say, for example, all right, wait a second here. I think this is confusing me here. The next thing you have to learn is in every language, there's a data type that is like an array, for example. In some other languages, these are called lists or collections. But in here in PHP, we have them as arrays. Now, these are the heart of every programming language. So you must know as many array functions as possible as you can. So if you just go to php.net and type array functions, you will see this whole list of array functions right here. So all these are very, very important because they allow you to manipulate data in a very simple way. They improve your programming skills because you would definitely, one way or another, you're definitely going to need a lot of these array functions. So like, for example, a sort here or r sort. These are used to sort the data inside an array, or there's probably something like array sum. Let me come up here, maybe I'll see something. So array sum, for example, you can calculate the sum of values inside an array just by calling this array sum and putting in the array that you want. So let's take a look at just this one here and see what the documentation says. So here it says array sum. So this is the description right here. So the description is calculate the sum of values in an array. So how do you do that? So array sum is right here. This is how you write it, and this is the syntax right here. So it tells you that it returns an integer, or this pipe is or a float. So right here, when you see the word float, you can now go back to the type declaration and see, okay, what exactly is a float? So the value must be a floating point number. Oh, wait a minute. This is not showing the types. So I'll just type float here, for example, is float. So what exactly is a floating point number here? Let me click there. Oh, wait a minute. Variable types. Let's see that, what we get with that one. Wow, these guys are terrible with their search, unfortunately. Okay, so if you can't really get what you want from here, all you have to do is Google it like this and say float php.net, like that, and then you get the result. Google is much better at giving you results from php.net than actually searching on php.net. So there we go. So floating point numbers. Now these are numbers which have a decimal point here. That's what they are. So floating point numbers, also known as floats, doubles, or real numbers, can be specified using any of the following syntaxes. This is what it is right here. Okay. So this whole thing here shows you how floating point numbers work, but that's not the point. The point here is that when you come to array keys, for example, where is that array sum, is that the result, this part here at the end of this, is the result of this operation, which is here. So once you see these full colons, this at the end here is the result. And this is the syntax right here. And then this value here is the type of this variable here. So this is a variable here, and this is its type. So what this is saying is that to use array sum, you need an array, that's one. And then once you put the array in there, it's going to do its calculation. That's all it needs. And then the result of that calculation is going to be an integer or a floating point number, meaning a number with a decimal point or a number without a decimal point, which is an integer. And that's it. That's how you do these things. If you go to something like, for example, array keys, okay? So as usual, if you look at this statement right here, let's start with this one here. This means that array keys returns the value that the result, as you can see here, it tells you that it returns the keys, numeric and string, from the array. So it returns both numeric keys, just the keys, from an array. And so if you look at this, it says what you have to give it is an array, and the result is also another array. And this is its syntax here. Also, this is another version of the same thing, and it returns an array also. But this time, you can give it more than just your array. You can give it a mixed value, which could be the search value. Now, the search value is mixed, so it can be anything. It can be an array, it can be a string, it can be a null value, and so on. So you give it your array, you give it the search term. So once it finds the term that it's searching for, it's going to return the key for that particular thing. I know that because it says that right here. It says if search value is specified, which is this one, then only the keys for that value will be returned. And then here there's a Boolean. So if you see an equal sign in any of these, it means this particular item is optional. It means you can run this function without actually giving it this value. But if you don't give it the value, then it's going to be automatically equal to the value that is specified here after the equal sign. So in this case, it means this value is going to be false if I don't specify it. It's a Boolean, so it's either true or false. So it tells it whether it's going to be strict or not. And then the result of this whole operation is an array. So being able to read things like this is very important and very key into understanding how all these array functions actually work. So just spend a bit of time and look at all this and try to see whether you can determine how something works just by looking at this information right here. And when you're done there, go and look at all the array functions here and see if there are functions here you could be using that you're actually not using yet. Okay, and the beauty of all this is that there are examples. If you go down here, you always find some examples here, which can help you further understand what is being talked about here. So php.net, definitely indispensable tool. So once you're done, so just to recap a little bit, you start with the syntax, you learn the syntax of the language, then learn to read the documentation, which is what we've been doing just now here. It's very important to learn to read that, and then look at a list of array functions and if there are lists in your language. So once you have those, they can really help you to speed up your workflow. And then the next thing now that is very important is error handling. So no matter how good you're going to be coding, you will definitely get errors in your code. Now, being able to determine what caused that error is very, very important, because many people get frustrated when they see errors in programming languages, and then they end up completely giving the whole thing up because they can't figure out what the problem is. So let me teach you how to actually solve some errors so that we can improve our coding skills that way. Okay, so to start with, let's open a quick document here and do some coding. So of course I am using XAMPP for my server. If you're not familiar with this, just download XAMPP and open the control panel, install it, open the control panel, and make sure Apache is running. So just click start here and it will start running, and that's all you need. So once you're done with that, just open any text editor of your choice. I'm using Sublime Text, but you can use even Notepad, is fine. So what I want to do here though is to save this document. So I'm going to go into my XAMPP folder. You have to go to where you installed XAMPP. Mine is in C XAMPP htdocs, or on your system it could be the www folder or htdocs, right? And let me create a folder in here, and let's say I don't know what to call this. I'll just call it PHP, or let's call it test, because we're just testing some stuff here. So in here I will put an index.php page where we're going to do some testing, and save that. Okay, so back to my browser here, I will type localhost and /test, and then I will say yeah, that's enough actually. So the page has actually loaded. So here we can actually try to put some stuff, because if I type that and refresh, I will see that text there. So everything is working fine. Okay, so let's see, let's try and create a few errors and see what could be the possible causes of these errors and how to actually fix them. Now in PHP there is 4 types of errors. So let me just copy these here, just as a reminder of the errors that are there. So the first type of error is a warning. Okay, now a warning is a very simple type of error. It's just there to warn you that something isn't working well, but the whole script continues running even after that warning. So the warning isn't really that critical at all. Let me create a new file so I can paste the stuff here. In here I can write some actual code. So let's see what would cause a warning, for example. So if I delete everything here and run my page, you see that nothing shows, so no errors there yet. But let's put some PHP tags over there for a second. So a warning is simple. For example, if you miss, let's say you're trying to include a file. So let's say if I say include file.txt, for example. Now this file doesn't exist, of course. Now this error is not critical because I just told it to possibly include this thing. So if I try to run this, I will get a warning. So as you can see here, you see warning include txt failed to open stream and so on. So this is the error that we get. So now what most people do is that once they see this error, the brain just shuts down and they don't want to actually read the error. They just say, oh, this is bad. What do I do now? And they rush to the internet to see if they can get some advice there. But if you just sit down and read the error, you will see that it's actually telling you what the problem is. So to start with, how to read the error, you see it will show you the error is on line 3. Okay, so if you go back to your code, it will tell you the page index.php on line 3. So it's very important information. So you go to your index page on line 3, right? We are here on line 3. Good. So this is where the error is. But what exactly is the error? And if you look carefully here, it will tell you no such file or directory in this. So when it says in, it means this is where the error is in this page. So no such file or directory found, it means it didn't find a specific file or directory it's looking for. And then here you see some more data. It says failed to open the stream. Now the stream is a file. A stream is just a collection of data. For example, bytes from a file, that's a stream. And then it's telling you here that warning include file.txt. So it's actually showing you the code with the problem and telling you this code has failed to open the stream. Even here it says failed opening file.txt for inclusion. So this is very straightforward, a warning telling you that a file is missing. So what do? Once you see that the file is missing, make sure you go to your directory and check if the file exists. Now, usually in terms of files like this, if you don't put any directory at the beginning here, it means this file, you are looking for it exactly where this file is in as well, the index.php. Okay, so you have to make sure that that file exists there and make sure the file extension is correct as well. So that's what a warning does. Now, it's important to note that the warning, if I had put echo down here and say echo here, for example, you will notice that it's going to echo this part still, because the warning does not stop the script from running. It continues to run even with a warning. That's why it's just a warning. So you will see that here is there, because this warning hasn't stopped the script. Okay, so that's about warnings, but let's try something else. There's also what is called a notice. So usually this comes in with undefined variables and the like. So for example, if I say I just say echo a, something like this. So a is not defined completely, so it doesn't know what this is. So you get a notice with this. So refresh and you get a notice there. Undefined variable a. So again, the notice does not stop the script from running. It still runs. The only thing is that it will set this as a no value like this, null like that, which no means nothing. It's void. It's like void, which is the same as no. So if a variable is undefined, it is set to a no value like this. So that's why it's possible for it to continue without having to actually stop the script, because it can give it a default value. Okay, so that's notices. Also, sometimes if let's say you are missing, let's say I do something like this. I say echo this line like this, and I don't put a semicolon at the end. Oh, that's actually something else. Wait a second. We are moving on to parse syntax error here. So those are warnings and notices. So a syntax error is usually for missing text. Now, as this says, this is a parse error and also a syntax error. So let me explain this a little bit. What parsing is let's say, for example, you open a file with text and you have all this text here, and you start going through the file to see what data it contains. That action is parsing. So you are checking the file to see if it's either valid or not, or you want to get some information from it. Just the very act of moving through the file is parsing. So a parse error means the file has failed to be parsed correctly. So what causes this is usually some missing text, or maybe a missing keyword or something like that. Because what happens here is that once you get your PHP file, you are done with it, and then you want to run it in a browser. To you, it looks like once you refresh the page like this, things are just running here, but a lot is happening in the background. So the first thing that happens is PHP will get this file and parse it. So it will go through the file from beginning to end. Even if it's a website that you are running, it's going to go through the entire website to the point at which the page has finished loading. So it's going to go through that entire process and check if everything was written correctly in terms of the syntax. And then once that process is done, it's going to get all that text and convert it to machine code. So it will convert it possibly to assembly and then to machine code. That way, the computer will understand what you actually typed, because the computer doesn't understand this like echo this, echo that. It doesn't. the only thing the computer understands is 010101. So all that text that you write is converted to zeros and ones. So in order to do that, the file has to be parsed first. And then after the parsing is done, then it's compiled into machine code. So during that process, there will be a parse error if there's some missing text or a part it doesn't understand. For example, if you are missing a semicolon here, what will happen is it won't know where this line ends. So it's just going to be surprised that there's no semicolon here, or it's running through this and then suddenly there's echo there. So it's like, what happened? We haven't even finished with this echo. Why is there another echo here? So it must be something missing here. So you get an error here, which is a parse syntax error. So let's see that. If I refresh here, you see it's a parse error, syntax error here. So syntax is the language, of course. So it means there's something wrong with the language. Something you did, you broke the language here. So it says unexpected echo. So very important here. It's saying on line 5 in this file, on line 5, there is an unexpected value called echo. So what you do in this case is you go to that unexpected value. So let's go back here to the value, which is echo on line what? On line 5. So if this value is unexpected, it means definitely the problem is before this part. It means the problem is not in front here, anything after this, no, because it's unexpected, meaning at this point it was expecting something else and this came in. So the problem is right before this unexpected value. So because right before this is actually this part, so it means here is where the problem is. So it even gives you suggestions. It says it's expecting a comma or a semicolon. So one of these two is what it's expecting, but it found echo instead. So definitely it's expecting a semicolon like that, and you put that there and everything is fine. Sometimes it's because you put a bracket at the beginning like this and you don't put the closing bracket. So what will it tell you? Again, a syntax error. So it says unexpected semicolon. So let's look at that on line 3. So it's saying on line 3 there's this semicolon that is unexpected, and like I told you, if something is unexpected, then the error is before that unexpected value, which is right here. So does it give suggestions? No, it doesn't actually know what to expect there. So all you have to do is look around and see, okay, did I miss a bracket? Did I miss a semicolon? What did I miss? And then you get it. So I missed something here, and then you put that and everything is honky-dory like that. Okay, so that's what syntax errors are like. They're just simple language mistakes that you've made. So you're just going through the language and check before that error point there. And then there's these fatal errors. Now fatal errors are errors where one thing I forgot to mention here is if I refresh this page, you will see that the script did not continue. It didn't echo this thing down here. So when there's a syntax error, it can't really understand what's going on, so it stops the script right there. So with a syntax error and a fatal error, things do not continue. So let's refresh here. Let's come back and let's try a fatal error this time. So in order to get a fatal error, like I said, if the error is, let's say, an identified variable, it can always push in a default value there, so that's not really critical. But if, for example, you call in a function that doesn't exist, so if I just say something like my func, like a function like so, so this is how we call a function, of course. Now if I try to call a function that doesn't exist, you'll see that now I will get a fatal error. So fatal error means things could not continue. Definitely, this is a. Now there are different levels of fatal error. There's a runtime error, there's a compile errors, and then there's what's the other one? Now I can't remember the other one. But these error, for example, a runtime error means during the running of the program, maybe you code a function that it couldn't find. So that's a definitely runtime error. and things don't work well, so it stops right there. Then there's a compile error. So during the compiling, it may run into a fatal error and then the compilation will stop. Also, there's errors that happen when loading. I've just forgotten the name of that one. Hopefully I'll remember. But those are the errors that happen, but they are all fatal errors because they stop the program from continuing. So let's look at this thing here. It's saying a fatal error has happened on line 3. So this is the beauty of these errors. They tell you exactly where the error has happened, line 3. And what exactly is it saying? It's saying call. So to call is to call a function. There are two things you can call in here. There's a function or a class. So it says call to undefined function, my func. So it's saying my func is undefined. So what undefined means is that you haven't told it what exactly my func is. So you must tell it first before you try to call it. So if, for example, at the top here, I write function, my func. Why do I keep writing T there? Like this. So this is how we write a function. Now, this is how we create a function. So this now function is defined. It's just that you're used to seeing these two apart like this, but it's the same thing as that. So once we create that function, then the error will not exist anymore because now the function is declared. It's the same thing with classes. So for example, if I want to say something like a class here, I'll say A is equal to new class is my class, something like this. This too will cause a fatal error. So you see fatal error, unquote error, class my class not found. So that class is undefined as well. It's not found. Now, yeah, actually, this is all it is about fatal errors. So these errors, even when you use require as well, it's the same thing. If for example, I say require a file, because there are two ways you can include a file. You can either say include. Now, include is just a suggestion. That's why it doesn't stop the file, the script from running. But if you know that a file is absolutely required, you have to use require like this, file.txt, like that. Okay. Now, once you do that, then you turn this into a fatal error situation, because now you have a warning saying require, just like you would get a warning with include, but at the same time, it creates a fatal error because it failed to open the file. All right. So far so good. It's the same thing with when you have few arguments as well. Let's say, for example, my func is declared here. Let me remove that. So I declare the function and I tell it that it requires maybe a few arguments here. Let me just put one argument there like that. So it means when calling it, I have to put an argument there as well. Now, if I try to run this, it will tell me unquote argument count error. So the argument count error means the arguments are these items here inside the function. When you are calling the function there, those are arguments. So if it says argument error, it means either on the function or on the call, the number of arguments does not match. So it even tells you here, it says too few arguments to function. So if too few, it means when calling it, you called it with arguments that are fewer than what's required. So like here, what we need is one argument at least, but we have supplied totally 0 on this one. So this is why it's complaining. So I can solve this error by just giving it an argument there, but then I'll have to declare this argument right here. Otherwise I'll get another error right there. But this is the gist of the matter. Let me refresh. And so it will tell me undefined variable, but at least now the function runs because this item has been, a null value has been set into this to make it run. So it doesn't create a fatal error per se. Now there's something important here I want you to notice. Let me get back this error just a minute. Let me get it back to that. Okay, so let's get back those errors. So if you notice very well, there's this thing called stack trace. Now the stack is very important here. So for you that don't know what the stack is, this is where the program is stacked. So the instructions, these instructions that you write line by line. So every time you write an instruction like this and you put a semicolon, this instruction is saved inside the memory. So there's a stack there. It's like the shelves in your cabinet, for example. There's a lower shelf, upper shelf, and so on. So what happens is for the program to run is that there's a list of memory that is allocated to that program. So all those instructions are shoved into memory in readiness for running them. And so what happens sometimes is that the program will start reading and reading and reading, and then it will get to the very top of the memory stack, and then it will exceed and try to read above that stack. And then it will find that that memory location does not exist. So what happens is you get a stack overflow. So this is where the term stack overflow comes in, because the stack has overflown, and so you get an error. So here, this is the stack. It's telling you what exactly is in the, this is a tracing, like when you are investigating, you trace. So it's a stack trace. So we're trying to see what happened, where did the stack come from, and up to where it got to. So let me give you an example here. If I do this, if I go back here, so we have this stack trace issue. But at the top here, if I echo out a pre-tag, for example, I do love these pre-tags because they make reading data a bit easier. So I won't put a closing pre-tag because I'll put it down here. If you don't put a closing tag, then everything gets inside that tag. So that's good enough. So if I refresh now, you see that the error looks kind of different. The display is a little bit more human readable. So it tells you too few arguments here, but then it lists the stack trace here. So you see that there is main over here, and then there is number one, right? Main. First of all, it shows you the error is thrown. This is where the error is thrown in this page on line 5. But then it gives you a stack trace of main 1, and then my func 0, and then this in bracket is the line number. So if we look for my func, we'll find it on line 7. So let's see if that's actually accurate, which is right there, line 7. So what exactly does this mean? It means it's telling you how far it went with running functions and classes. Okay, so here it tells you which class it actually ran. So everything in here is running inside this main class right here. This main, I don't know if it's a class or a function, but I think it's a class. So the whole program, the whole of PHP is running inside a container called main, which is this one. This is the main. Just like you have the main class when you're dealing with C++ or C, when you're programming in C, you have the main function. So everything starts from there. This is the default running part of the program. So this is where it started from. So if you notice, the very thing it started with is at the bottom, not at the top, but at the bottom. So you start from the bottom to look at this stack trace. So it started with main, and then it went to this function right here. And so the last part of this thing is where the error occurred. And that's actually true. The error occurred here on my func where there's too few arguments. So let's make the stack a little bit more complex so that we can see how to deal with that. So let's look at, let me create a function within a function. Let's try something like function. Let's try simpler names like foo and bar, something like this. Foo. Let me create this argument a. I'll just equate it to a string like that, and then I'll say function bar like this. Okay, and then inside bar I'm just going to say echo. Now in here I will echo, I want to create a fatal error here, not a warning. So if I try to echo something that doesn't exist, I'll get a warning, but I want a fatal error. So I want to call I want to try and call bar. So let me try and call it from outside here. let me say echo here. I'll do that so that we can see when it actually runs. But then I want to call this from here, say bar like that. Foo will require a variable because we have a variable here, or let's remove the variables for now just to make things a little less confusing. So as you can see here, there's a function and then there's another function in here, and then we want to call the function over there, but let me call a function that doesn't exist, like function 2. Let's say bar 2, like so. So what will happen here is that actually, just a second, let me come in here. Instead of echo that one, I want to call a function, just function b, like that. So what's happening here is that I'm running this function. When this thing runs, the function does not run, but then I call the function here, and then the function will run. Now when the function runs, there's another function in here which I'm actually calling, and then inside this function I'm calling another function that doesn't exist. So the error will happen here because this is non-existent. Now bar has to be at the bottom of this function, because if I put it at the top here, because the way the function executes, it starts from the top to the bottom, this function will not exist at this top here. So I will cause an error if I put this line at the top here. So to avoid an error, I'm putting it down here, and then I'll just create the error in here. Now the reason I'm creating the error in here is because I want the stack trace to be a bit higher than it normally is. So let's try that, and let me refresh. So as you can see now, we have a few more lines on the stack. Let me zoom in here. So to begin with, it starts from the main, and then from the main it goes to foo, and it runs properly because there's another item at the top, which means here it was successful, which is this foo right here. So the foo function was fine. But then when we went to bar right there, this is where the problem came in, and it says uncaught error, call to undefined function b. So as you can imagine, if I do create another function here called b, like this, and inside b I try to call c, then you see that the stack trace will increase. As you can see here, the stack trace is much higher. So with complex websites, like where the website is inside, like when we use OOP, object-oriented programming, you find that the stack trace is quite huge, because you start with the classes and then you go to functions and you go down the line, and the stack trace becomes quite high. So you can use this to know where the error is. So just by looking at this, you know that the error is right in here. This is the function with the error on line 14, even though the error was triggered on line 12, which is this one, but calling this is what caused the problem. So these are tools you can use to figure things out using the stack trace. So the stack trace is very important, for example, in programs like JavaScript, for example. In JavaScript, where you have a lot of functions in your page and you want to know which function exactly caused a problem, there's always a stack trace in the console as well, because JavaScript runs in the console here. If you say inspect element and you go to the console, you will see a stack trace here. So we can put that to the test so that I can show you exactly what I'm talking about. So here I will remove that to avoid causing an error so that the page is empty. Okay, then I will remove the here, of course. Let me just comment it out. Okay, so the same principle applies in JavaScript. So if I go to JavaScript like this, I say let me actually close the PHP tags first, and then I'll write script like this, and then we have some JavaScript there. And so let me create a function here quickly. This is function, let's say function A. Okay, and then there's another function here, function B. And then there's a function C. So all these are functions that can be calling each other and so on. But let's put a button here. Let's say input, and then in here I will say type button, but then I will give it an on-click listener here so that I can call my function A like that, and put in an event in there like this. Okay, so right here I'm calling this function, and what does this function say? It says alert me and say I am here. Easy peasy, right? So let me refresh this and click on the button. The button doesn't even have a title, but you see the point here that here it gets there. Let's put a value instead of having a nameless button. I'll just say click me. Okay, so now instead of calling this, I want to call this from inside inside C, for example. I'm just going to say alert maybe, I don't know, F, just something that doesn't exist, right? I'll put this in here, alert F. But in here, what I will do is I'll call B. I'll say B, what's going on? And then, since I'm calling B in there, I am going to call C in here. So these functions are just calling each other. So this one is calling B, this one is calling C, so that the stack trace is quite huge. And then when I click, nothing happens, of course. And so if I inspect the element here, this is where the debugging starts, and I go to the console here. Now you will see immediately there, let me make this bigger. I don't know how I can zoom this. Oh, it actually zooms pretty good. So as you can see here, what's happening is it's saying uncaught reference to F. F is not defined, meaning that we didn't declare F. This is what it means, a reference error. It's referring to F, which we have not defined. Simple and straightforward. But then there's this list down here. Now this is the stack trace, just like in PHP there I was showing you. This is the stack trace. So it starts here. It tells you that what happened was that somebody clicked something. There's an on-click listener right here, okay, inside this document, though it starts at 1 because 1 is where for example, if I put these scripts here, 1 is here. So this can become a bit confusing because those numbers do not correspond to these numbers here. But once you have a script tag like this, your numbers are jumbled because now 1 is here according to JavaScript. This is why it would be a good idea, instead of putting the script in here, you put the script inside a different file, a JavaScript file, so that you have the correct line numbers. So to do that, you just say script like this, and then let's remove that, and then you put source like that. Source is equal to, and then you can name your file like script.js like this. Okay, so let me get all this, cut it from here so that we are not using it from here. So now the script is in here. So let me just create a new file, paste this stuff, save it as script.js like this. Okay, so this is exactly the same thing. So if I refresh now and click here, I still get these issues. And now, at least for now, I can have the correct numbers. Like I know the file and it's on line 11 where there's a C. So where is that? Line 11, which is right there. This is where the error starts from. Okay, so the point here is that there's a stack trace. It shows you that somebody clicked, and then the function A was called, and then from there the function B was called, and then the function C. And so the very last item at the top here is the one where the error happened. So this is how you know where your problem is. It can help a lot to know and follow this stack trace. Okay, so enough about stack traces. Let's see what else I have installed here. Okay, so we've handled the stack trace, few arguments as well, you know, and then there's undefined offset. So these are some of the errors that do happen. So let me remove the script tag here because we don't need this anymore. All this is out. So for example, if I have if I create an array, for example, I say A is equal to array like this. So then let me add some items in here. Let's say 0, 1, 2, something like this. So there are 3 items in there. So I can go from 0, 1, 2. But if I try to access number 5, for example, then I get an overflow here. So let's see how the error comes in. So I'll close this and refresh my page. And then you see, notice undefined offset. So undefined offset means you are trying to, the offset is like the index here. So you're trying to access something that is out of the system, away from the selected system. So in this case, this is an array that has 3 items, but I'm trying to access something on the 5th level, which does not exist. This is why you get this error, undefined offset. 5. So it tells you the offset is 5 that you're trying to get, but does not exist in, and this is the file, and on what line number. So errors, if you look at this, errors are actually quite easy to, they really help to figure out what the problem is, and they're invaluable. Once you know how to deal with errors, you're going to be a very, very good programmer, because there's no problem you would not be able to solve based on the error. Now, so some final thoughts here on how to improve, of course. So the important thing to remember is that if you happen to get an error that you do not really understand, the internet is always there, and the internet is your friend. So what you do with these errors is you get the entire error, you copy, just copy the information that is not very specific to you. For example, this number 5 here is specific to me, and the reason why is because I'm trying to access number 5 here. It's not everyone who has this error who's trying to access number 5. They could have been trying to access number 10. And so this is very personal information. What you need is just the general idea. So copy all this here, copy that, and just go to your Google page and just browse and see what happens. So of course the Stack Overflow website is the best, usually, because people ask questions here and others answer. But of course you can check out these other systems here, these other websites, and see what happens. So let's look at what Stack Overflow has to say. So in this case, somebody posted a question. I have no idea what this question is about, but this is what I get here. So if I was having a serious problem, this could be probably solving what I'm trying to see. And then you get here and you see there's a tick mark, which means this is the right answer. And there's some code here. So the normal thing that people do is they just come here and copy the code, copy and go to their code and then paste there, and start wondering why things are not working well. So you could do this and things will work just fine. That's not an issue. But the problem is when you do copy and paste, you are depriving yourself of learning how to code. So every time you see some code on Stack Overflow like this, try and understand what's going on. So you can copy the code and paste it here, but once you try and read through it and see what's going on, you have to delete that code and type it yourself. So it's not, I'm not saying you should type it from memory. No, what I'm saying is put it side by side with your page like this, and then minimize that like this, and then actually type it with your hands like this. Whether or not you are actually understanding what's going on here is irrelevant. The important thing is that you're actually typing the code yourself. This will build muscle memory. It's like an example I'd give is somebody who learns to ride a bike by watching others, and one who actually tries to ride the bike. You can tell which of the two is going to do better, of course. The one who actually rides and doesn't dwell too much on the theory is going to do much, much better. But the one who will just watch the bike experience is a very different thing when you actually do something. So it's very important that every time you see this code, take the time. I know it takes a lot of time, but everything is, when you're trying to be a master, you have to put in the time. So type the code yourself. You will be surprised that just by typing like this, your muscles will have memory, will remember what you are doing here, and it will become easier in future to do these things. So that is very important. It's like I'll give you a very short story here, because I'm also a graphics designer, so I use After Effects by Adobe to do certain things. And somebody had called me and asked me, how do you create, because he was creating a square in there, a shape, and he was saying, how do you round the corners of that shape? So my answer was that, give me 2 minutes so I can go and try the thing and see how I'm going to do it. Then I'll get back to you. Now, the important thing here is that I already knew how to create those corners, but I had forgotten in my mind. I couldn't remember how to do it right in that moment. But the moment I sat on the PC and actually touched the mouse and created that shape, I just found my fingers scrolling using that middle scroll mouse button in there, the middle scroll mouse button. And from nowhere, that was just muscle memory. My fingers remembered how to do it, even though I wasn't remembering it in my mind. And so immediately I was like, oh, so that's how you do it. And then I called him back and gave him the info. So in the same way, it's the same with coding here. As you code more, you have muscle memory. Your muscles will remember what you're doing, and you realize that things become easier as you do that. And one more thing is that do not copy. This is very important. When you are learning on YouTube, do not get the source code ever. So if you're watching a tutorial and the source code is given, don't be tempted to get the source code. This is a very big mistake that most people make. Type along on your own. As you are learning there, you must type the code yourself. That is very important. If you get the source code, you are depriving yourself of a learning experience. So you are going to get to the destination, but it's going to take much longer and you're going to waste a lot of time. So type the code yourself. Practice, practice, practice. This is very, I can't emphasize that enough. And then finally, now, once you build your muscle memory, give yourself some challenges. So how do you do that? So to give yourself some challenges, just go to the web. Just open any page anywhere, just go to google.com, right? Let's just go google.com like this. Let's start with Google, something we already know. So Google is right here. Now look at Google here. If I start typing something, you see it brings suggestion here. Whatever I type here, there was a okay. So as you see here, as I'm typing, it's giving suggestions. So you ask yourself, how is it doing this? Can I replicate this kind of thing? So then what do? You go ahead and try to recreate this thing. And in the process, the point is not that you're going to get it right or not. No, the point is that one, you're getting some experience in coding, and two, whether you succeed or not, you are going to learn something new that you didn't know yesterday. So get the biggest websites you can find and try to replicate them. For me, what I did was, the moment I learned how to read PHP, how to write PHP, the syntax, I told myself I'm going to make a social website. And it took me like 6 months to make the social website, but at the end of it, I had learned so much information that I was practically a pro. And on top of that, because I launched the website and people started telling me their experiences with the website and asking me to change things, so I had to research on how to change those things and how to add more features and the like. And in that process, I became a much better programmer. So those things are very, very important to remember. Give yourself challenges. Find websites, try to create them. Even this php.net, this is a very simple website. Design it, just designing it, and try to see how much of it you can get right. Okay, and so just let's recap a little bit before we shut down. So of course, learn the syntax of the language, read the documentation, very important. Then learn the array functions. So the array and string functions, you must learn those. Just learn as many as possible as you can, and you don't have to learn everything at once. You can just Google it. You can say how to, for example, how to add numbers in an array, and the function name will come along. For example, we can do that just right now. If I say PHP sum of numbers or something like that in array, I don't know, you can type anything in there and immediately you see this is a PHP function that comes in array sum. That's how you know. PHP, for example, get array keys, and immediately you will see array keys comes there. Okay, get key from array. You can search for all these things and then you see it there. Then when you go to the PHP manual here, it will give you all the information you need about array keys, like I had said here, which is good. Okay, so after that, learn how to handle errors. Of course, very important. You don't have to learn the different types of errors, but just reading the actual error that comes up, you must learn how to read that. Also, there's before I forget, there's one more error that I haven't, which I think I have seen in the comments on my channel. So let me address that one as well. So for example, if you have, let me create a simple class here for a second. Let's say class, my class like this. And then here I will have a function here, let me just call it me, like so. So what would be valid here is for me to say something like a, or my class is equal to new my class, something like this. Okay, so this is all valid. But then actually let me just use a here just to simplify things. Now if I say a and I try to, instead of me, I put you there like this. So I'm trying to run a function that doesn't exist here. So I'm going to get an error here. So of course it's going to say call to undefined method. So this means that the method I'm trying to call, which is you, like here, my class you. So when you see these double dots like this, it means this is a class that is here, and then this is a function inside that class. That's why you see the double dots there. So in saying this class here, or this function here, does not exist in this class, this is what it's saying. So, or sometimes you can have, I declare this, I say a is equal to null, like this. Okay, and then I try to read from a as if it was an object, which is a class. So you will see this error this time. It's going to say call to a member function you on no. So what this means is that the call, I'm trying to call a function from within a no object. So I'm telling it that I'm saying get this function from a no, which is not possible because a no is not something that contains anything. So obviously this function can't be inside this. So when you say on this, then you know. Or sometimes if I try to say false or true, I'll just write true. So the only thing that will change here to tell me trying to call member function on Boolean or boo. So if I refresh, you see exactly that's what happens. It's telling me call to a member function on Boolean. So what this means is that this is a Boolean, which is a true or false statement. So I cannot do this on a Boolean. Even on an array, I can't do this. If I say is equal to array, which is an empty array, like this, and I try to refresh, you can't do this on an array. So this is what these functions mean. So with this in mind and the stack trace, and you know exactly where the error was thrown, I think these are enough tools for you to actually figure out what the problem is. Okay, so I hope I have helped you enough to figure out how to improve your programming skills. So I will see you, of course, in another video.